So the reason I wanted to talk to you was because I was thinking about I I I see you as a person who really specializes in comedy and being funny, and you spend a lot of your time doing it.
I
Do,
would say that that is a fair assessment of me.
yeah. So I think this is for me. I feel like I pursue like a polymath thing a lot and try to do be a jack of all trades, and I'm constantly excited about new skills and new pursuits and new projects. And um, the unfulfilling part about that is that I don't I don't see myself progressing forward, and sometimes I don't feel like I'm a master of something. So I was wondering, do you see yourself as like as somebody who's dedicated to one thing?
That's a great question. The short answer, oh boy, there is no short answer. So
Good.
the medium length answer starts when I was in college. I remember specifically, like as I was approaching graduation, like I was like, oh, what am I going to do? I was the things that I considered doing were being a teacher. Both my parents were teachers, so I considered getting an education degree. I was getting, at one point, a math major, which I eventually stopped enjoying and being good at math as much as I had been, so I made it a math minor. So I thought maybe I'll be a math teacher. Maybe I got a psychology degree, so I was like, maybe I'll be a counselor of some kind. Maybe I'll get a graduate degree of some kind, social work or a doctorate or a master's. But then also, I had been playing music my whole life and had only in the past several years started really loving doing that. And, the same way that for applying to colleges, I feel like people are like, you have some reach schools and you have some safety schools and you have some ones that, could go either way. And so my reach, like, aspiration was music. Was at this point, I'd been playing guitar and writing songs for a bunch. Like for like just the past, from when I was 15, I started teaching myself guitar and just started writing songs a bunch and playing them around college. And I was like, if I could have this be my career, like that's what I want. I want to be like a singer songwriter, touring, recording. That's what I want to do, to the point that like I didn't study music in college because I didn't want it to become an obligation. I didn't want it to become what I had to do. So like I joined a choir, I joined an a cappella group, but ultimately I left. I felt like I was being pulled in all these directions. I was like, it feels like which one, if I want to move forward in one direction, it felt like I was putting like 20% into five different directions, and so therefore wasn't moving at all,
Yeah.
which probably wasn't true, but that's what it felt like.
Right.
But I decided my senior year that I was 21, that I was able to like go out and get into bars where I could perform my music, which is what I wanted to do. Like I left the a cappella group that I had like auditioned for like I think 5 times before I even got in my junior year, was in it for a year and loved it, but it took up more. I was like, this isn't what I want to do with my I don't want to be in my college a cappella group for my life. Though, I mean, at this point I'd be like, oh, that sounds like fun. But I was like, I really wanted to build my own solo performing music career, and I was like, I want to dedicate the time necessary to do that, to go out to open mics, to go find where to perform, which is ultimately what led me to comedy. Like the first, so I would say that the first thing that I was good at was music. Was like I played the violin since I was 4. I was sort of made to take music lessons and theory classes and join in orchestras and quartets and master classes for like every weekend for my most of my child life. Um, and like I didn't love it until I didn't have to do it, and then I did love it. And so then that is why like that I felt good to pursue that. And then I went to grad school mostly in one way, mostly to allow myself more time to not have to decide what the thing that I was pursuing would be, because to allow myself more time in the Boston area to go out and find more more open mics, more venues where I could do my music, which was then shifting to, as I discovered that comedy was what I sometimes was doing and then wanted to do. And I was able to find
So you
way
were
more.
getting up, you were doing stand up comedy or music comedy?
Good question. One which shifted into the other. I performed. So my senior year of college was 1999 2000, and I went to a bunch of music open mics first, and then I also found the Comedy Studio, which is a comedy club that is now in Somerville, Massachusetts. Was in Cambridge then, and I asked them if I could come there and play some songs because I had funny songs. I was like, "Can I play funny songs at your comedy club?" And I was able to. And then like in between the songs, I would like do what I would now call riffing, and then I would call talking until people stopped laughing. Um, and that was like planting the seeds of my like wanting to do comedy, because initially I was just like, this is just another place where I can go to do music. And so between 1999 and 2002, I probably performed at the Comedy Studio like a single digit number of times. Like I didn't get booked a lot. I was mainly performing at music open mics and things. But every once in a while, I would get to be on a night there, and it was just so much fun. But I was like a comedy tourist or hobbyist at the time. I was pursuing music until 2002, when I'd sort of started writing jokes, and I'm like, I kind of want to expand the amount of time. If I'm, instead of doing like two songs during a set, I want to do like, I'll do like one quick song at the end, but like I want to try out all these jokes. I want to, and that is, so I 2002 is when I say I started doing comedy, because that's when I started going to comedy open mics, even though I would still bring the guitar with me, because the only way that I knew how to end a set good was by playing, you know, this short one of a few different short songs that I'm like, these ones work, you know.
Yeah.
So do 4 minutes of jokes that don't work and one song that kind of does, you know, little by little improving. And so I now have been doing comedy, you know, since 2002, and I did like focus all of my, you know, sort of creative energy resources into that. And I now, like, I still have a guitar. I still like write music and record music and enjoy playing music. My mom gave me me and my girlfriend now have a keyboard that I don't play all the time, but like I never specifically learned, but other than teaching myself a little, but I want to do that. So I also, if I had infinite time, you know, if a day if a day was longer, which it's funny because, you know, like, okay, the day is 100 hours now. So in any given 100-hour day, like, I mean, there's the things that I love doing involve, you know, writing and making music and like walking outside and reading and, you know, listening to podcasts and learning things. Like there's more things that can be done, more things than can be done in a lifetime, you know? And so we get to, I like to think of it as we get to choose like what are the most important things to do. And I mean, even having this conversation with you now, we're having because you asked me if we could, and I wanted to. And there's a fortunate coincidence, is that on Fridays, which today is Friday, a friend of mine, normally at 3 p.m., I would go to a writing workshop where a friend gives a bunch of us poems as prompts, and then we read those poems and then write for 20-25 minutes and then share what we've come up with, and then, you know, offer constructive, generous responses to everybody else's stuff. And it's just like a supportive environment for creating whatever you want to create. That's something that I didn't do before the pandemic, that I feel like now, now in so many ways, without the future being like as quote unquote certain as it seemed like it was at some point, like, oh no, like in school, like, you know, do this and then you get a degree and then you get a job. Or even in comedy, like work and eventually you'll have funny jokes and then people will hire you, and then you can try to, if you want a writing job, you can do this. If you want to act, you can do this. If you want to
Yeah.
perform around the country or around the world, then here there's various steps to different kinds of paths. But right now, I feel like I asked people online today, on behalf of my girlfriend who read 100 books, 101 books so far this year. She's like, I wonder how many books other people are reading. And like the answers are like kind of a pendulum between some people that are like, I've read over 100, and some people that are like, I couldn't read one, Uh, Rini. Oh. Um, Rini, my girlfriend, says that some people suggest she should get a hobby. And she does have one, which is reading. Also knitting. There's a lot going on. That person should get a hobby of not judging, or whatever they want to do. But I feel like during this time, I I have been like up until the pandemic, I released a new album this year that I'd recorded last year, and I had a new hour of comedy that I was working on touring, that I was going to bring to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in August, as I brought the last one 2 years ago. And now I still have that. Now that's sort of on hold. That I plan to bring it there next year, whenever it is possible and safe and healthy and happening. But in the meantime, over the past 8 months, I haven't been like working that show. I haven't been doing those jokes. I've been like, it didn't seem like the thing to do to tell people like, hey, 2 years ago I thought this, and now it's important for me to tell you that, as opposed to now most of the shows that I'm doing some elements of riffing and being in the moment and just being present, and I'm writing things, and they're coming up. I'm from show to show, like people might see some of the same ideas and topics and
Yeah.
things.
You are running this conversation. What?
You're right.
When did you land on like doing comedy, deciding like this is the thing? Is that
um
did you ever do that? Did you ever decide?
yes. So in my linguistics grad student days, a thing that I learned about linguistics is that it's about studying how people do speak as opposed to prescribing. It's about describing how people speak as opposed to prescribing how people ought speak. People might be like, "Oh, please don't use your linguistics degree to tell me I'm doing things wrong." I'm like, well,
Hmm.
actually, that's not what linguistics is about. So you're doing things wrong. But similarly, the way that I discovered that I loved doing comedy was I by happenstance, like incidentally, organically, I found myself at a comedy club in between songs, uh, saying things that people were laughing at. And so a joke that I'll tell sometimes is when people say, "When did you know that you wanted to do comedy?" I said, "A little bit after I started doing comedy." Because I found myself doing something and I'm like, what is it that I'm doing? Because I'm enjoying it. Like I didn't
Hmm.
know that this was a thing to strive for. So it's all been like sort of the same way that like, the way that gratitude works is if there's ever a time that you've been happy, if there's anything that's brought you joy or peace or made you feel productive or like you had achieved something, like what was that? Be like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
glad that happened. And can I recreate the circumstances, or perpetuate those circumstances? So I would say somewhere between 1999 and 2002 is when I decided that I wanted to keep trying to make happen on purpose the thing that was happening accidentally, that I was enjoying and other people at times, audiences, were seeming to enjoy. And then I learned, then I very like I wouldn't say that I'm not clinically diagnosed with OCD, but I would say that on the spectrum of obsessiveness and compulsiveness, like I have some tendencies that sometimes serve me well in focusing on one task, one idea. And so I started keeping notebooks full of jokes. I started meticulously, going to open mics and trying them. And I started like reading books by comedians and watching, documentaries, and, now like listening to podcasts and all kinds of things. And like all of the interviews, all the things that older comedians, that experienced, successful comedians said, the main thing was just do it. Just get on stage, write and perform, listen back, watch your sets, edit, and just keep doing that. And so I understand. And they're like, there was a movie called Open Myq that Richard Jenny and a bunch of other comedians were like interviewed about their open mic days. And Richard Jenny said something like, if in the beginning you feel like you suck and everyone's telling you suck and every audience sucks, he's like, you're probably on the right track. So like I understood that there was no guarantee of getting better, and there was no and so that was actually freeing to be like, okay, this is the way it's supposed to be. So I'll put in, I'd heard other people be like, give your dream 10 years. And if you haven't achieved it in 10 years, then maybe get a different dream or something, I think Eugene Merman said something like that I liked.
Yeah.
But so I was like, well, right now, I was in grad school. I was fortunately living for free as a resident assistant, in exchange for doing that work. I had a job at the Barnes & Noble cafe as a barista. I eventually got like a linguistics job at this technology company that was very flexible in terms of hours. I could do them like 10 in one day if I wanted to, and then like travel or if I needed to. And so all of that sort of combined to allow me to like go out most nights in Boston where I was living and do comedy, and just have in mind that like I'll keep having all of the jobs that I need to support my financial needs. And then little by little, my understanding is like, if I get better, then I'll be able to, get $25 for this show, or $50 for this, or $100 this weekend, traveling to different places around. And so the desire to do it, was sort of, it was all kind of the same way that sometimes, there's a new comedian, you're like, wow, an overnight success that has been in the making for 10 years, because everything is gradual until, you know who the person is. And so similarly, I think that my desire to do comedy came like, there was like an initial spark, and then it was just like, well, let's just see what we can do to foster that spark and increase and improve it and myself. So yeah, somewhere gradually from 1999 until now.
Do you what do you feel is a good comedian?
What do I feel is a good comedian?
What do you think is my linguistics might not be perfect, but you can't criticize them. What do you think is a good, what's the bar for you?
Sure. I think that my initial goal was to become a working comedian. In my mind, that meant only doing comedy and not having other jobs. And that is something that is not necessarily within my control or within anybody's control, because we don't create the economy. We don't create, almost anything. So I wouldn't say that that's my bar now. I would say that kind of even beyond for a good comedian, I would say like the best artists of any kind, the best musicians, the best comedians, the best dancers, like let's say music and comedy, the ones that I'm most familiar with, like at the epitome, the upper echelons are people who like Reggie Watts. Is he a musician? Is he a comedian? Is he a performance artist? Whatever he is, he's Reggie Watts. Like he's the best Reggie Watts that there is, and there's nobody that's like competing with him as himself. There's certainly other people who do beatboxing or use looping for their vocals in music and or comedy. Like there are people who I'm like, oh, like Drennan Davis is a wonderful, fantastic performer that if I was, if one of them committed a crime and somebody was like, hey, the criminal was an amazing artist who uses loops and beatboxes, be like, well, round up Reggie and Drennan, and right. Maybe it's one of them or somebody like them. But I mean, they're both, uniquely themselves in the same way that, Like Maria Bamford is the Maria Bamfordiest, and Paul F. Tompkins
Hmm.
is the Paul F. Tompkinsiest, and Dave Chappelle is the Dave Chappelliest. And so I feel like that is, I think, the mark of like the a great artist is that they are themselves uniquely. For a comedian, also, I mean, you might want them to be like funny, but that could be subjective. But like, I mean, even Carlin at times, one of the most influential, oft quoted as like the favorite of your favorite comedians. And if you look at some of his specials, there's like long stretches where there's not laughter because he's, kind of being a poet in a moment or for minutes at a time.
Right.
Because I think Lenny Bruce once said, "I'm not a comedian, I'm Lenny Bruce." And I feel like that is the epitome of most like brilliant artists, is that they're not a category of thing, they are themselves.
Right. And um, I call that a brand, but you call it being a comedian or being
Yeah,
a good
I
comedian.
yeah, I would call it being a good comedian. For me, like
How far on the spectrum do you think Myq Kaplan is to being Myq Kaplan the ist?
that's I think I'm the most Myq Kaplan-y that I've ever been. So I think I'm certainly 18 years farther along than I was 18 years ago. Um, a joke that I tell people sometimes now is like this is a thing that can I forget now what's the truth exactly of this situation, or and what have I imagined, but
Mhm.
for sure I know that like I here's my level of like notoriety is uh it's relative, like the same way that I have a friend who's a Buddhist who shared with me that um imagine three mountains north to south, one furthest north, the other furthest south. And if you ask about the middle one, is the middle one further north or further south? Well, it depends which one you're talking about. Is my finger big or small? Is it compared to a mountain or is it compared to an atom? Like everything is relative. So my level of success, my level of fame, my level of being myself is unparalleled. There's very few people who are myself, um, as much as I am, and so everyone here's the level that I have. My level of notoriety. This is the joke. Something like there are people who are surprised that I write them back when they email me. They're like, I can't believe you're writing me back. And there's other people that are like, upon hearing this, I can't believe that people email you. Or there could be two friends on a street. I feel like this might have happened one. This is the one that I'm not sure. Like, two people see me, and one of them's like, "Oh my God, Myq Kaplan! I love this guy. Do you know Myq Kaplan? He's a famous comedian." And the other person's like, "No." Uh, so which is I'm very grateful for all that I have accomplished. That I've been able to make my living as a comedian. My initial goal since around I don't think I've had another job since around 2008. I've been able to just make my living touring and releasing albums and whatever else has come my way via comedy. And I mean there's more comedians that most people have never heard of and will never hear of, and there's billions of people that haven't heard of me, and I'm entirely fine with that. Like I'd love to be known by as many people as would love me. That's I'd love for if you there's certainly people out there who haven't heard of me who like every year, like if I put out a new album or if I'm on a new podcast, like I'll get new fans, and they'll be like, where have you been? And I'm like, well, I've been here. I'm glad that you're here now as well. So I mean,
do you
uh
how do
please.
you how do you feel about your position as a comedian in the world?
Uh, I'm super grateful. Like I think the biggest shift in the way that I have lived and worked as a comedian was probably 2010 when I did Last Comic Standing, where before that it was very rare for anyone to be coming to see me specifically. Like I just started headlining maybe a year or so before that, and I'd been on TV a little bit, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And those were like credits that were used to attract people to be like, oh, this person's been on this show, so come see him. Like, well, I don't know who that is, but I've heard of that show. And Last Comic Standing was the first time that people started to come see me because they had seen me, and they're like, I want to go see you. Um, and so still to this day, there are people who come to see my shows that are like, I first saw you on Last Comic Standing. And so I'm grateful that that happened, and that now, like wherever I go, sometimes there's still people who are just coming out to see a comedy show, but more and more, I'm doing like, I'll do independent shows at like a rock club or a theater or, the basement of a video store, wherever I'm invited to, that they're like, we're going to get people here to see you. And so, like, as the ratio gets higher and higher of audience members who are there to see me, I am, more and more grateful for that opportunity. Um, and like,
I,
'cause I know there's so many people who would be thrilled to be where I am,
mhm.
metaphorically, emotionally, creatively, career wise. And I can certainly look at people and be like, oh, wow, look at people who, there are people with more Twitter followers than I have. There are people with a wider platform at this point, but I'm glad to be where I am. To like, we're all in, we're all in my initial end zone of like, oh, this is creating the comedy that I want to create, and making making a living from it.
Yeah. W- How do you? It seems like every time I interact with you, you are saying funny things, whether you're whether I'm talking to you or you are sending a short email or whatever. There's always funny stuff in it. Do you feel a? Do you ever feel a burden to be funny? Like, do you ever feel like that's what people are going to expect of you because you're a full time comedian and that's what you're dedicated to?
That's a great question that I'm happy to answer. The short answer is no. I don't feel it is a burden. And oh
Like when
man,
somebody runs into you on the street and they recognize you as a comedian, then you're like, who is my wait, am I in my persona that they expect me to be? Do you, I don't know. How do
so
you how do
oh
you
no,
navigate that social, yeah,
I have a lot to
expectation?
say about this. I think that when I started out, my goal was to like, I didn't know exactly, like, I didn't know if I would succeed as a comedian. I just knew all I could do was do the work, which was to think of things, observe things, record things, and then, purvey them. And I think that I did it so much, and I still do, that I did get good at being the comedian that I am, to the point that now, like, it's I find this funny that I'm having this conversation with you and imagining people watching it or listening to it, where I'm like, I'm just so confident that, because and again, I'm not trying to be arrogant that like I'll always be able to come up with something funny in any situation, but that I have found so much joy, I have created so many things thus far, descriptively speaking, and the best, what is it, the best like indication of what the future is going to be is what the past was. And so like, I'm not making any claims to being capable of being funny. Just the past is the thing that's claiming that I could be funny because I was funny. And here I was in the middle of this thinking like, the thing that I thought was really funny is I didn't initially think that how I was answering this question was particularly funny, but that's okay, because you weren't asking me to be funny. You were asking me about being funny. And just, that is, again, freeing. Like, if I'm on stage, it might be quote unquote important to be funny. I might be there telling people like, hey, here are, you paid to see a show, and here is the show. But even that, like, my favorite ways to perform are to not know exactly everything that I'm going to say, because some of the most fun I have is discovering something new in the moment, and like that's a magical kind of thing that certain audiences get to experience, and more when they're like an audience willing to be open to that, be like, well, I don't know what this is going to be, as opposed to, this better be funny, this has got to be, you just do the thing, you've been funny before, do it again, be funny again right now. And so I don't even feel an obligation to be funny on stage. So I certainly don't feel a burden to be funny to a person walking down the street.
You don't. I find that hard to believe. Because you don't seem like you're just like, I'm just going to get out there and express myself. You're very object. I'm sorry, we've gone over time. I don't want to.
Oh no, I'm
Do you have a
happy to
few more
keep
minutes
going
to
if you'd
talk?
like.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Um, you don't seem like you're just a subjective, like, this is comedy whether you laugh or not kind of person.
No, no, I'm excited to be having this conversation, because I'm
Like when I
not
talked to
saying.
you, when I interviewed you before, you talked about ping pong and you talked about responding to the audience. So you're definitely responding to something with some goal.
Oh, yes. And to be clear, when I say I don't feel an obligation to be funny on stage, perhaps that there's one sense in which that's an exaggeration. But there's another sense in which it's really, I think what I'm saying hinges on the distinction between, I have to be funny for this audience, or I want to be and I get to be. And the way that I often get to be is by not feeling that I have to be.
Yeah.
That, like, they, with relationships, the classic advice of, like, you'll find what you're looking for when you stop looking, whatever that thing
Mhm.
is. And just when you least suspect it, audience, just what, I'll find something funny here, maybe, or I won't, and that'll be okay. Good night. And
Yeah.
so I I do. And here's the thing, like, if I'm being, let's say, hired, like, to perform for not just my audience, if somebody is like, hey, come in and do this corporate event or this festival or a TV taping, like, when I go on TV, I'm not just finding things in the moment necessarily. I
Right.
am sometimes a little, but I'm, doing a set that has been planned. I'm preparing and respecting the environment and the producers and the audience. And I think it's a matter of, in some ways, uh what is the expectation? Like I said, my favorite audiences are ones that are like, we trust you to do whatever you want to do because we came to see you and you're you, which could sometimes mean I'm like, well, let me follow this thread of a thought down a path that I've never gone before, which I think, based on my experience, of finding it valuable to follow such threads, like, but every once in a while, I'll get to the end of such a thread and be like, well, there was nothing here. I guess let's go back the way we came and find the next thread, like a choose your own adventure where you were like, well, I thought this was the way to go. But, and so the more I do that, like it used to be, I think I got good early on at telling jokes that didn't work and then succeeding despite that, or like right after, if it was just coming up with savers that worked at an open mic, to be like, well, if you didn't think that one was good, you're right. But whatever it might be, um I think getting closer and closer to, who I would become, and part of that is being comfortable on stage, part of that is being confident, part of that is like knowing who I am a little more. Like, it's all relative. Like, it's not that I feel no obligation, but I feel like there are definitely some comedians who are like, I have to do this, when
Yeah.
they don't even have to do comedy.
Right.
Like, I really do feel like it's all coming from a place of get to. And
Right.
And so, but to answer your question of do I feel, I really sincerely, like, I love making people laugh. Like, I was one thing, and I don't mean to keep you longer than you want to be kept as well, but I'm fine. Uh, my girlfriend's grandmother died a year or two ago. It's hard to tell with pandemic time in intervening, but at a time when we could visit, she lived in Florida, and her funeral was there, and so we went. And I was meeting some of my girlfriend's relatives for the first time. I'd met some of them, uh, but like, for example, I remember my girlfriend's Aunt Annette. I think that's the first time that I met this woman, who she comes to a lot of my online shows. She's like, I feel like as much of a friend as my girlfriend's aunt can be. She's a very sweet lady. And my girlfriend Rini had shared with me that this woman was this warm presence in her life. And so I was, it was sort of bittersweet to get to meet her at a time when she was like at her saddest. She had just lost her mother. But I found, like, at the reception, sort of, after the service, as we were all kind of eating and talking, and I was there in a supportive role, like listening, but every once in a while, there was like a person would say a thing that would like seem like an opening that I could be like, I think that this is an appropriate place to say something that will make this grieving person laugh. And it felt like a valuable service that I could provide. And it's like, I wasn't trying to make light of the situation, but it was something that it worked. Like, my skills as a comedian were helpful in this environment, in part because nobody was expecting me to do it. In part,
Yeah.
like, I wasn't there hired to perform, and that wouldn't
Right.
have been good if I were. And so the fact that there were no expectations, like, that's sort of an analogy I think that makes it clear. Like, nobody's like, hey, you're a comedian, where's your jokes at the funeral? Like, so, but now this is funny, where I'm like, oh yeah, hey, okay, here's my jokes at the funeral. I was able to provide some respectful, enjoyable, in the moment, fun jokes at the funeral.
What do you think is what do you think is a positive thing about specializing in comedy?
That's a good question. I mean,
Don't make it a good question.
oh, I
Just
mean,
answer it.
well, the thing that I
Let's
mean,
let's do a lightning round here.
okay. Well, I want to say that when I say that's a good question, it usually means that I don't have an answer
Right.
prepared. So it's just vamping until I can say. I mean, comedy. I love comedy. I love helping people laugh. I love laughing. I love offering that. I love that when people say thank you for the laughs, I can say thank you for the laughs. That a laugh is something that each person is giving and receiving. And so I think specializing in comedy, lightning round answer, is just something that allows me, like, immediate, sometimes, insights into, like, joy and life and connection with other people.
What's the downside?
I mean, I think that there sometimes is an expectation, not that I will be funny when people want me to, but that I might be when they don't want me to. Uh, and I haven't found this specifically because most of the people that I know me not as a comedian, but know me as a human being, one aspect of which is for my work and for my joy, I do comedy. But sometimes I think that people don't understand, if, people who don't know me as well might not understand everything. People who know
You
me well understand everything.
Yeah. You I heard you recently talk about saying no to things and having boundaries, and um and that's what you're doing constantly as a person who's dedicated to a thing. So because you're just saying no to every, like, idea or side project or whatever that comes up that isn't going to help you with that thing. So can you think of an example recently of something that you might have been excited about, but you said no to it because it doesn't
I
help
could
you
do
with it?
you one better.
Okay.
I'm 100% in the middle of a situation like that right now. In the past couple weeks, somebody who is a producer of podcasts reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we have a budget for like sort of high concept podcasts. Like, do you have ideas?" And we will pay you if we, like, I want to work with you. And it would take a certain amount of time to construct an idea, to think of, there's a lot of, there would be work involved with making this money. And there's part of me that's like, oh, when if you're offered money, if you're up for a creative job, like that's the dream. And yet at the time of asking, like, I haven't given a no. Like, and what I'm going to say is, I believe, like, the idea, he was like, it could be an idea like this or whatever you think, uh he was like, I want it to be something that you care about and are passionate about and that you want to spend time getting to do. And I'm like, that sounds perfect. And still the answer might be that my time is already full of doing that in other manifestations, in like the I still, I'm not playing the keyboard as much as I want to. I'm not, making another music album as quickly as I might want to, or collaborating with a visual artist on jokes that I want to release as a book. Like, there's so many things that I want to do that if somebody was like, here's unlimited funds, like, make, what do you want to make happen? Like, I have podcasts of my own already that I love doing. And so the question of, what do I want to do this new project that somebody like believes in me and likes my work and wants to work with me, like, and I want to say yes. And also, there was one other time that I hosted a show that was really fun to do, and I did a lot of riffing, and it was being taped, and the idea was it was going to be, I believe, like, sold to a Eurasian like station somewhere, that they're like, we want American comedy. And so the idea was that I was going to host like 25 weeks in a row and make a good amount of money from doing that. And the idea that I was able to just, like, I'm just riffing, that's amazing. And then we made the pilot, and the producer came back to me and was like, they actually preferred your like prepared bits more than your riffing, so what about that? And I was like, well, I actually don't want to do 25 weeks in a row of like 10 minutes of my prepared bits. That's a lot of 20 25, that's 250 minutes, that's like 4 hours, that's like 4 albums worth. Like, I don't always have 4 albums worth of material that I've created in my, like, I have that much, but I don't have it all memorized. I'd have to like go
Yeah.
back and relearn things that already existed. And I was like, I kind of don't want to do it if that is the work.
Yeah.
And the guy was surprised. I was like, yeah, I just, I want to spend my time creating new things, not relearning things
Mhm.
that I've already done. And
So
so
when
that, yeah.
when an opportunity like that comes up, do you make the decision on your own, or do you ask other people for help?
That's a good question. I do have a manager who, I don't remember if I talked to him about this specifically. I probably did. And so for specifically like business logistics type things, I'll talk to my manager, who I've worked with for over a decade and is my friend, and I respect him and he's very good at what he does. I'll talk to my girlfriend, who I've been with for 4.5 years, and she like knows me and like knows what I like and what I'm into and
Mhm.
what, so she's a good sounding board. And then also my good friend, and yours, Zach Sherwin, is a comedy longtime bud of also, now I've known him for multiple decades, and we've been very good friends. I'd say best friends for more than 1 decade at least. And he's a guy who also has lots of good specific ideas about being creative and and doing the work that we want to do in life. And
Hmm.
one other friend who I had also mentioned that you might have heard me talk about recently, Chris Duffy, another just good comedian buddy who really has ideas and implements them and has good ideas for other people about their ideas and implementing them. So yeah, there's a lot of people, and that's just some. I won't keep listing all the people that I know and might talk to, but there are a lot of people who I feel like I'm close to in life and in comedy and in show business and art creation that uh, ultimately I know that I'm the one who makes the decision. Like that there's no, that's a thing that's always good to remember, that there is no right answer. Like that I'll get to the end of my life and look in the back of the teacher's manual and be like, oh, that was what I was supposed to do that show. Like if I'm the person deciding and I would rather do something than something else or not do something than not do something else, then that is at the time the thing to do.
Cool. Do um do you have fear when an opportunity comes up, when a new opportunity comes up?
Um, to a degree, like something else that came up today or yesterday, my agent sent me an offer to perform live in Kansas City in March, and I'm like, I don't think we'll like vaccine wise, I don't know if it will be as safe and healthy to travel as possible. So there's a few other gigs that came up as possibilities, like over the summer, in the early fall, that I was like, I'm gonna play it safer. My girlfriend has asthma and this delicate lungs, and so if I'd rather take more time off than necessary than get somewhere too soon, put us at risk, and regret that. And also, each time that I say no to a performing opportunity, I'm like, I hope that they offer it again. I hope that it wasn't a one time. This is it. I mean, and some venues are going out of business, and so some opportunities might not arise again. But I'm optimistic that as as the world receives the vaccine, there will be comedy venues, there will be opportunities, and so now I am going to. I said no, I can't do that Kansas City gig in March, and the next day it was offered in July, and so I'm optimistic about it. And still, like there is a lot of unknown aspects. Uh, there's a lot that's unknown about the future, Scott, I guess is what I
Huh.
would say.
Okay, I didn't know
I
that.
I don't mean, oh yeah, I don't mean to be controversial, but I'm I'm the kind of guy who knows, if he knows anything, he knows stuff about the present and maybe the past, but surely less so. I think I know less about the future, but who can say? I have a lot of dreams. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do feel that, oh like like what, no, but I'm through through some of the things that I read and through some meditative practices, I can hopefully like see those moments when they arise and laugh at them and be grateful for them, and and experience them and feel them and process them and do my best to understand and get through.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for talking.
Oh,
It was
thank
very
you for asking.
insightful. Um, well, good. I got
Yeah.
stuff. I'm just gonna put up this interview. I was
Uh,
like,
Great.
I I was thinking about how you're an example of like I saw the Michael Jordan documentary. Have you seen that? The
I
or
haven't.
it's not about Michael Jordan. It's about the last season of the Bulls with Michael Jordan.
Hmm.
Um and with their whole team. I like sports documentaries. I don't like sports that much, but I like sports documentaries.
Sure.
So I'm fascinated by him as like a person who pursued one thing and so hard. Like and and that is one of the things that made him stand apart, was that he was his other people were doing like studying, working on being good students or working on whatever their personal lives, and he just did that. And I see that, and like I'm fascinated with like Britney Spears, who's like just made to be a pop star all of her life, and what what level can be attained by doing that, and what sacrifices come, or what sacrifices are committed by pursuing one thing also.
Sure. Do you, I mean, is there anything that you do that you've done throughout your life that like you love doing all the time that you do it, and if you had unlimited time you would do it more than you do?
I think I'm afraid to commit to that stuff. I think because of, like, you might have heard it in the questions that I asked, that I feel like, if one one thing I've realized about myself is that I've spent, my main driver in life is avoiding criticism. So um I became a pancake juggler because there were no other pancake jugglers. I I played organized sports when I was a kid, but my dad was very critical of how I played sports and how I practiced. So I started doing magic and juggling and all these other things that nobody else around me was doing, and that nobody really had a say in whether I was doing it right or not. And then when I got into the world of supporting myself, I didn't work very hard to make money because I didn't want people to think that I was trying to make money, and then they could judge me on a scale of whether I was successful or not. Um, and so I feel like these, my pursuits in life have been, I've been very curious about a lot of things, and that has like helped me get to the place where I am right now, which is amazing. I get to help a lot of people and I get to entertain a lot of people. um, Entertainment, being an entertainer, has been my primary thing, and it's been something that I could kind of do stealthfully until I actually got good at it, and then I could come out as already being ahead of the curve. But also, people don't, most people don't understand that I'm good at it, like, in a way, because like, people will come up to me after a show and say, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been on doing shows? And I'm like, oh yeah, since I was 11. And then they're like, wait, what? Because my style is so messy that they think that I've lucked into succeeding that night a lot of times. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I do you know Kate Berlant?
Yeah.
I love her. And the very first time I saw her, she and I think Jacqueline Novak and John Early like ran like a small show in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and she was hosting, I think, or doing a set, and I was watching her and I was like transfixed, and I didn't understand because it was the first time I'm seeing her, and it was like, years ago, and I didn't know if she knew what she was doing, but I was like, I couldn't take my eyes off. I was like, this is, I don't under, because I'd never seen whatever it was that she was doing before. And then I saw her again another time and she did like a different set and I had the same experience. And then the third time I was like, she's doing this on purpose. She's clearly like, I don't understand exactly how she's doing what she's doing, how she's, created this character or coming up with these ideas or being present or improvising, whatever it was. Like, I couldn't even quote much of it to you,
Mhm.
but I was like, oh, like there's a thing I saw once at in the People's Improv Theater backstage. There was a sign for like improvisers saying like, assume that everything's on purpose and everyone's a genius, which is like, if you don't have any other evidence, why not? And so, like, trust and verify, but if you can't verify, why not trust? And so I felt like it seems to me that you are a similar way in that story that you just told to the way that I felt about Kate, who I think is a genius, and that the way that I was like, the goal is to become yourself. Like, you like can't even be mistaken for like any other specific category of thing. You're only, Scott Nery, entertainer, extraordinaire, purveyor of fine entertainments. Um, so, and that, I mean, I've also always, as long as we've known each other, uh, from our conversations, from this conversation, from our emails, like, you're it's so I'm and I'd be excited to have you on my podcast at some point and ask you more questions. But it seems to me that there's a Scot Neryness, that that exists, that you exude, because even though you haven't been specifically pursuing only juggling or only magic or only music or only anything, you have been exclusively, racking up Malcolm Gladwell style tens of thousands of hours of Scot Neryness,
Yeah.
that this curiosity, that this inquisitiveness, like it's all, bubbling beneath the surface of everything that you do.
Thank you. Yeah. So, um, I love, I love a certain kind of fulfilling entertainment situation. Like I'm very objectively driven in entertainment, and to I know what it feels like in a room. Like that's why it doesn't bother me when people come up to me and say that it looks like I'm an amateur, because they'll go over and compliment something they recognize even if it wasn't good. They'll go like, "Oh, I love those blonde jokes you did," or whatever, to somebody else, you know and I know, like, they aren't the expert. They don't need to be the expert. They're the audience member, and I know what happened to them when I was on stage, and I know what happened in the room when that other performer was on stage, and I know what experience I want to create. So I'm like so driven to make that experience continue to happen and continue to refine it and grow it and codify it and figure out how to give that to other people, whether it's our future robot overlords or whatever, to make really incredible gamified fulfilling experiences for people. um, so that's the thing. Like, if I had unlimited funds, I think I'd be doing what I am doing right now, which is creating stuff and consulting with people and coaching people, because I can just tell somebody, like, here's what you're going to do, here's how to fix exactly the thing you're trying to do, and they go off and do it and come back and they're like this, and I'm like, yeah, that's done without me sitting in front of a computer or whatever. It's
Oh
so
yeah,
fun.
it's way easier to have somebody else do their work. Um, I- One other thing that, whether you include all of this or not, I'm happy either way. But just to tell you, so I played violin from when I was 4, and like sort of through high school, and then some in college and some into my 20s. But like not in my 20s, I'm more focused on guitar and comedy, and I can still take out the violin and, like, I can play a little bit. But I remember I didn't practice as much as I was supposed to. I was supposed to do like a half hour a day at a certain point, an hour a day. Like, I know now that my teacher could tell, like I was a good sight reader. I could like fake it a little bit. But I remember thinking specifically, like, I'm good. Like, yeah, I started early, and I had, my parents were music teachers and musicians, and so I had this, some perhaps either natural or nurtured talent from early on. And I was like, so I have this talent, I'm good. And I was like, just imagine how good I'd be if I did work as hard as I was supposed to. And to me, that was enough at a time to be like, just imagine this would be like, I'd be double as good, when in fact I'm pretty sure that if I did, at a certain point, once you're good, the graph gets like way closer to, like, it's like an asymptote, like approaching the best you can possibly be. It's not just going exponentially up, 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 up. And but so it felt better to be like, oh man, imagine I'd be double good, as opposed to if I actually put in the work, to which I feel like connects that. I thought of it because I resonate with the idea of, like, one of the reasons, I don't know if this is why you don't want to be criticized, so you don't want to, like, if you work hard at something and you get good at something, like along the way, like whether it's comedy or whatever, you're going to have times when people don't like it, or people let you know that it isn't what they wish it was, and it
Yeah.
might not be what you wish it is. And so it is sometimes easier to not do something than, to do something, be bad at it on the way to being good at it.
Yeah. What do you think what do you think is a, that's too intellectual. What do you think is like a trait that people have that that doesn't, I don't know. I'm doubting my question.
Oh, no, I think it's going to be great.
Well,
Great
I see
question.
like, so so with Booby Trap, I was we were putting up 14 people, 15 people, 15 acts in a night every week and for 5 years, and I was getting submissions of different people doing things and people, so the main thing was we were booking acts. We most almost everybody that we put in the show was an act of that was ready for 4 minutes. It
Hmm.
wasn't about finding somebody that's funny and putting them on stage. So, so what I found was that most people don't do that. They don't put together an act. They don't put together something that's solid that they believe in that works. And like even a magician might be like, I need like 12 minutes to really get into, and I'm like, well, there are plenty of shows for that. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But I was fascinated by that. What separates those people? What separates the people that have their set act, that some people do a 4 minute act all their career. That's what they do. They travel around the world doing handstands for 4 minutes or whatever, and it's perfection. And some people never get to that. In the same way, you pursue comedy, and you've gone through a lot of like pass or fail situations with that. And
Oh, yeah.
so,
I mean,
so what do you
I,
think? What do you think separates you from the people that don't want to commit to being a specialist like that?
uh, perhaps one thing that springs to mind is that I don't necessarily conceive of it as pass fail, and that every every 5 minute or 4 minute or short open mic set that I would ever do, like I would see as like learning something from it. That if a joke didn't work one way one night, then that didn't mean it wasn't going to work another way another night, or even that way another night. And so it all felt like I talked to a guy who's a writer and a comedian, and he told me like I'm focusing more on writing than stand up because I feel like if I go to a stand up show and it doesn't go well, then I feel like that night was wasted. But I could have been home and written 12 pages. And I was like, isn't it possible that the 12 pages that you wrote might not have been good or made it into like your final product? And he's like, yeah, but it's like steps towards it. And I'm like, that's you're a writer and I'm a comedian. Like you're like Edison, said that I think there were like 999 or 9,999 like steps to get to the light bulb that he saw as not failures, but well, that one doesn't work. So that's one more step closer to it working, which means every step is working. And so I think it's some combination of like delusional confidence that that is what's happening or will happen, or like not caring about what other what, like you said, you not that you don't care what people think. I think that's, but you don't care about the audience member who doesn't understand what you're doing's criticism of what you're doing because you know more than them about what you're doing. And so I think it's a dedication, just a dedication to your vision or your future vision, that leads to being like, I'm gonna do this enough that eventually it'll be good. And so that means that in this moment it's good because this is the best that it can be right now on its way to becoming better. Whereas some people might be afraid of like showing people that, being like, I'd rather nothing than like somebody see me on my way to being good.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man.
Of course. Thank you
I
for
hope
having me.
I love your Christmas scene,
Oh,
and
thank you.
it was a pleasure talking to you, and I learned a lot, and I think that all the kiddies at home are gonna really enjoy this.
I hope so. Well, thanks again for reaching out, and I'll be in touch with you at some point in 2021 for you to be on my podcast if you'd like.
Sweet. Thanks, man.
Cool.
Good
Have
night.
a good fun.